Hello, what's your name? Can you tell me a bit about yourself and what you do?
So my name is Mothin Ali. I'm a councillor for Gipton Hare Hills, and I'm also the deputy leader of the Green Party.
Brilliant. Can you tell me a bit about a day in the life of being a local councillor?
I mean, the day really varies. It can be really intense with a lot of council work. So if we take the day of full council, for example, so meeting in the morning, going over the last minute changes to our speeches, and then what motions we're going to vote for, what we're going to support, what we're not going to support. We have that discussion within our councillor group, and then where we disagree, we really go for a sort of talk it out approach. I mean, if you look at the Green Party and its history of the Quaker movement, they'll continuously talk a problem where someone disagrees with something. They'll continuously talk and try and find a resolution where we can all agree on. And that's generally the approach we take in Leeds City Council, especially amongst our Green group. That's one thing that I really enjoy. We'll make space for discussion and make space for differences of opinion and talk until we find a resolution. Once we've done that, once we've settled our positions, then we'll go into full council, we'll prep for our speeches, the motions that we're putting forward, the white papers if we've got any. But more locally, it's a lot of casework. My ward is really deprived. So there's a lot of poverty, a lot of need. So it can range from getting a phone call from someone who can't get their children's school uniforms to come in and try and support them, people who can't pay their gas bills or electric bills, and trying to find a way of helping them. To the most common query is support with housing.
And what motivated you to get involved in politics?
I mean, I've always been quite politically active. I didn't want to become a councillor, or I didn't want to be someone at the forefront. I was quite happy working in the background. I was a Labour member for a long time, so I joined the Labour Party when I was 18 through the Unite Union. And we supported our local candidates, we supported our local MPs, and I just made sure that we were out there to support them, because I believed in what they were standing for. But I started getting disillusioned more and more, especially around Prevent and Tony Blair's push for that narrative around Prevent. There's a local young child, probably age 4 or 5, he drew a picture of a cucumber and tried to write cucumber. And as you can imagine, a 5-year-old spelling cucumber is a difficult word. And he was referred to Prevent because he wrote the word cuckabong. Yeah, and that really grated on me, and that was one of the things that made me fall out of love with the Labour Party. But I hung on, and I left the Labour Party in 2020, and that's when I joined the Greens. And that work that we were doing around Prevent and countering terrorism was between a group of us in the community and Green Party activists. So I teach gardening, so greens were the natural home for me as well. But I became a councillor almost by accident. I turned up at a meeting hoping to meet a bunch of hippies who would talk about gardening with me. And what I found was they were selecting candidates, and they needed a paper candidate for Gipton Hare Hills, and I became that candidate. And I'm not the kind of guy who just sits on my laurels. I started leafleting, and in that first year we got to 1,000 votes, and that was the first year that anyone who came second had managed to break that 1,000 vote barrier. The year after, 2023, I got 1,500 votes, and then in 2024, when I finally got elected, we got over 3,000 votes. I think it was something like 3,070, and we unseated a councillor who'd been here for 17 years.
Brilliant. Well, I'm a hippie who likes gardening. So I thought I'd ask you about nature and what you think the lessons that we can learn from nature that apply to politics.
I mean, the first thing we've got to figure out is, and the first thing that we've got to understand and appreciate is our role as part of the ecosystem. When you hear a lot of climate activists, they'll talk about the environment, but they'll leave out the human element and how we can play our part. We can play an important part, but we just have to find that right balance. We can live in harmony with nature and harmony with the ecosystem if we become part of the ecosystem. So that's one of my guiding philosophies. We're often told, that the planet can't support so many people. Maybe if we're trying to live the lifestyle of an American billionaire, yes, we can't. But if we try and live the life of a Bangladeshi villager, we can support a hell of a lot more.
What does that look like applied to the local level, living in balance with nature, when we talk about people in Leeds?
I mean, let's go back to my area, for example. We've got Gipton and we've got Hare Hills. Gipton's a large council estate. Hare Hills is quite inner city, terraced houses, very little green space. A really important thing is having access to green space. And in nature-deprived areas like that, how do we create green space? So I worked with a project with a local housing association, local police officers, and we set up a community garden in the middle of Hare Hills, in the middle of the Bayswaters. People told us that while we were building it, people were saying, making comments, oh, that's not going to last a day. There was a bunch of kids, teenagers, hanging about, watching what we were doing, asking questions. We built this community garden in the middle of summer, planted our plants and went away. We came back a couple of days later and we'd found that those plants had been watered. And it was those kids who were watching us, asking us questions, that had watered the plants with the super soakers. So when you give people access to nature, people really benefit from it. Another thing we've got, if you look at things from a systems design point of view, which is what permaculture teaches, if you look at places like Gipton, where we've got corner plots where there's green space, but it's been neglected, they've been turned into eyesores and they've been turned into fly tipping points, we could tackle multiple problems if we can give that community ownership, plant fruit gardens, plant orchards. People again are going to benefit from the food that those little gardens produce, but because they also look nice and they're part of the community and they have community buy-in, it'll stop the fly tipping. So it's win-wins all around, and it can be done for very little effort.
Fantastic. Yeah. You talked a bit about system design and things like that. I'd be interested to ask about how you think that scales up to the level of like a city.
One of the projects that I'm really playing with, and maybe one day I'll take it to a Green Party conference for a policy decision on it, is community infrastructure and community empowerment around energy supply. Now, we've got so much wasted space on rooftops, right? Now, imagine if there was funding available, whether it's from central government or local government, but for communities to set up solar farms. So we use everyone's rooftops, but everyone's rooftops aren't suitable. We've got south facing, we've got north facing. South facing, you're going to get the most sun, you're going to generate the most electricity. North facing, you're not going to benefit that much. So what we do is we connect everyone to mini grids, right? And that way, each person is responsible for each person, their neighbour's electricity. And if they're responsible for each other, what we're doing is we're building connections between those people, reliance between those people, and then everyone's building together. They're building an energy system together. They're feeding each other their electricity. They're lowering the cost of living for each other. So that becomes a community unit and is reliant on each other. And we build up the community back. So once they've generated enough for themselves, they feed that back into the national grid. And then it carries on like that. And if we set up lots of little grids, mini grids like that, and lots of community solar farms, we don't need all these solar farms being set up on fields. If those fields are no good for growing food, we can rewild them. There's lots of opportunities that approach takes, but we have to go for community empowerment.
Yeah, it's really good to hear you say that, because there's been times in my life where I've felt that electoral politics is disempowering for communities, because it's about having people solve your problems for you at the state level, but what you're talking about seems like it's much more rooted in grassroots community.
I think that's one of the differences with the Green Party, is so many of our politicians are actually people who are community activists, people who are part and parcel of the community, people who are embedded in the community. You'll see them at food banks, you'll see them at community cleanups, you'll see them at all sorts of community projects. They're not people who are airdropped in or because they've seen a safe seat and an opportunity and they think they can just win. The people who are really, really ingrained in the community, and that's why we understand our communities. because we're from there.
You're also the co-deputy leader of the Green Party, and I just wanted to know about having that national perspective, has that changed the way that you see politics?
I mean, yeah. I mean, one of the things that you do when you, as part of deputy, is travel around to different parties, and I'm very much a Yorkshire lad. My world is in Yorkshire, and that's how it's always been. So you don't always appreciate some of the nuances. So being Yorkshire, you think all the wealth is in London and all the wealth is in the south. But then when you get into the south and you start seeing the divides between different boroughs, especially in London. So I was in Newham not so long ago, and there's loads of investment going into where the Olympic Village was. Lots of nice posh flats. But just across the road, we've got this estate called the Carpenters. And what the London Council was trying to do was trying to move out families, trying to move out single mothers, so they can actually take over these council-owned flats and give them to sell them on to Russian oligarchs, Chinese investors, multi-billionaires from all over. And what they'd do is just create more housing for quite wealthy people. And they're creating 1 and 2 bedroom flats, so they're not suitable for families. They're trying to move out the local people and bring in people who are ultimately either going to work, they're going to not have that family approach, so there's less pressure on schools and hospitals and whatnot. But the big loss is you lose that community. You just create a bunch of workers and little holding cells for workers. We have to go back to creating community, and that's how we create society.
So if the Green Party were to win control of Leeds City Council, what are the policies that you'd be most excited to implement on day one?
I think more community ownership and protecting community spaces. And I'll share something that I did. There's a community centre in my ward, right? And that had been closed down for a while. And one of the things that the council were thinking about was trying to sell that centre. So the thing I did on day one when I got elected is I started holding my advice surgeries from that centre. Now, for a long time I was the only person who was opening that building, going in, sitting there in the cold, but making sure that that centre was in use. And then I reached out to a few community organisations. Here, look, there's a centre here, do you want to use it? And now we've almost got it fully occupied, and it's going to be much harder for the council to sell. So we've saved that community centre. So that's the way that we can save community centres, is make sure that we start using them and using them for the benefit of our communities. We own them as the public. There isn't this magic thing called the council that owns everything. Councils are custodians of public assets. As long as we remember that, and as long as we take ownership of that and hold public officials to account when they try and mismanage our centres and they don't allow our centres to work for us, we have to make sure that we're really involved and really rooted in this sort of thing.
I can imagine that on a national scale, with the amount of assets that are being sold off, and having a party in government like the Green Party that was, protecting those community assets. And so I guess, what do you think it would mean for the people of this country if the Green Party were to win a general election?
I think it'd be absolutely phenomenal. For too long we've had the main two parties just sort of echo the narratives of each other. When Labour are in opposition, they always talk about a left-wing narrative and they talk about supporting people. But the minute they get into power, they copy what the Conservatives did. And they track right very quickly. And what we've got to do is we've got to make sure that we have a party that's people-focused, a party that puts the concerns of the communities that they represent at the very centre. One of the great things I love about the Green Party is we don't whip. So where every single vote that we take is conscious focus. So we're free to talk to our communities. So even if the party line is X, if our community isn't benefited by that, then we can always vote Y, because we can be free. So that's one of the things that I love about the Green Party. But as well is no one becomes a Green Party candidate because they want to be a career politician. Our councillors work bloody hard do you know? And just to get elected as a Green Party representative, it's not easy. It's not easy. We've got the media. We don't get the media attention. We don't get the corporate sponsors. Our members fund us. So we are very much a grassroots movement. So having that, what people will end up with is people who are part of their communities and really care.
So if people want to see that happen to the camera, I guess, how can people get involved with helping get more Greens elected?
I think the first thing what we'd love is if you would join the Green Party, because our Green Party is made up of you, made up of members just like you, and they're people who want to make a difference for their communities. They want to stand up, they want to be counted, they want their voices to be heard, and this is the perfect vehicle for it, because that's how it was set up and that's what it was set up for. It used to be called the People's Party, and when we've got that tradition, we've got that pedigree, we're out there making a difference for our communities. Get involved, speak to your local branch chairs, your local party representatives, your councillors. Just get involved somehow.
Thanks very much, Mothin. It was a pleasure to speak to you.
No, absolutely loved it.